The wind howled with such fury that Lydia Prescott could barely see 3 feet beyond her cabin door, but something told her to look harder into that wall of white. And that is when she saw him. A dark shape stumbling through the snow like death itself was chasing him. She did not hesitate, yanking open the door and screaming into the blizzard even though her voice was swallowed whole by the wind. The shape lurched toward her, and she could see now it was a man, ice crusting his eyebrows and his lips blue as a winter sky. His horse must have thrown him or died, she thought, because no man would be on foot in weather like this by choice. Montana Territory was unforgiving in December of 1873, and this storm had blown in so suddenly that even the old-timers had been caught off guard. She grabbed him by the arm and hauled him inside with strength born of necessity. He collapsed onto her floor, his body shaking so violently she worried his bones might break. Ice clung to his dark hair and the stubble on his jaw. His coat was quality leather but soaked through, his gloves were gone, and his fingers were an alarming shade of white. Lydia had seen frostbite before, had seen men lose fingers and toes and noses to the cold, and she would be damned if this stranger died on her watch. "Can you hear me?" she demanded, kneeling beside him and starting to work his frozen coat off his shoulders. He groaned, which she took as a good sign. At least he was conscious. She had to get him out of these wet clothes immediately. The cabin was warm, the fire she had been tending all day roaring in the stone fireplace, but warmth would do him no good if he stayed wrapped in ice. She worked quickly, her hands efficient from years of frontier living. His boots came off first, then his socks, revealing feet that were too pale but not yet blackened. Good. His coat was already on the floor. She unbuttoned his shirt with fingers that did not shake even though she had never undressed a man before in her 22 years. This was survival, not scandal, and she had no time for modesty. "I need you to help me," she told him firmly. "I cannot do this alone. Can you move your arms?" He managed to shift slightly, groaning again. His eyes opened, just slits, and she saw they were a startling blue-gray, the color of the sky before a storm. He was younger than she had first thought, maybe 25 or 26, with a strong jaw and features that would have been handsome if they were not currently frozen. Between the two of them, they got his shirt off, then his undershirt. His skin was like ice beneath her hands. She grabbed every blanket she owned, which was not many, and wrapped them around him, then dragged him closer to the fire. He was heavy, solid muscle, and by the time she had him positioned on the rug before the hearth, she was breathing hard. "Stay awake," she commanded, going to the stove where she kept a pot of water warming. She poured it into a basin, tested it with her elbow to make sure it was not too hot, and brought it back to him. Gently, she took his hands and submerged them in the water. He hissed in pain, his whole body going rigid. "I know it hurts," she said, her voice softer now. "But I have to warm you slowly. If I do it too fast, you could lose your fingers." "Who?" he managed through chattering teeth. "Are you, Lydia Prescott? This is my land, my cabin. Who are you, and what fool thing were you doing out in this storm?" "Vincent Quinn," he said, the words coming out in shattered pieces, "was riding to Deadwood. Storm came out of nowhere, lost the trail. Horse went lame, I had to leave her. I walked, saw your light. You are lucky you did. Another hour out there and you would be dead." He did not argue with that. She could see him struggling to stay conscious, his eyelids drooping. She kept talking to him, kept working, moving his hands in the water, checking his feet, making sure his core stayed warm. She made him drink hot broth, holding the cup to his lips when his hands shook too much to hold it himself. Outside, the blizzard raged on, the wind screaming like something alive and angry. Hours passed. She did not let herself sleep, watching him constantly, monitoring his breathing, his color, the slow return of warmth to his extremities. Around midnight, his shaking finally stopped. His breathing evened out. His hands, which had been skeletal and white, were pink again, painful but alive. She checked his feet and found the same. He would keep all his fingers and toes. He would live. Only then did she allow herself to sit back, exhaustion washing over her. The fire had burned low. She added more wood, then wrapped herself in her own coat and sat in her rocking chair, watching the stranger sleep. Vincent Quinn. The name suited him somehow. He looked like trouble, even unconscious and recovering from near death. There was something about the set of his jaw, the width of his shoulders, that spoke of a man who lived hard and did not apologize for it. Dawn came gray and angry, the blizzard still howling. She made coffee, the smell of it filling the small cabin, and that was what woke him. His eyes opened fully this time, clearer now, more focused. He looked at her, then at the cabin, then down at himself, wrapped in blankets by her fire. "You saved my life," he said. His voice was rough, raw from the cold, but stronger than it had been. "I did what anyone would do." "No," he said firmly. "Most people would have let me die. It is easier, safer. You do not know me. I could be anyone, an outlaw, a killer. Are you?" He was silent for a moment. "I have done things I am not proud of, but I am not a killer, not of innocent people anyway." She poured him coffee and brought it over, helped him sit up enough to drink it. He winced but managed, cradling the cup in both hands like it was precious. "I owe you my life," he said, looking at her directly. The blue-gray of his eyes was intense, unsettling. "That is not a debt I take lightly." "You owe me nothing," Lydia said. "When the storm breaks, you will go on to Deadwood or wherever you were heading, and that will be the end of it. And if I do not want that to be the end of it," she looked away, suddenly uncomfortable. "You do not know what you are saying. You nearly died." "You are not thinking clearly." "I am thinking perfectly clearly," Vincent said. "You risked your own safety opening that door in the storm. You could have died trying to bring me in. You undressed me, tended me, sat up all night to make sure I lived. Why? Because it was the right thing to do. Maybe. Or maybe you are just a better person than most." She did not know what to say to that, so she busied herself making breakfast. She had eggs from her 3 hens, salt pork, bread she had baked 2 days ago. It was a better meal than she usually had, but she figured he needed the strength. They ate in silence, the storm still raging outside. It showed no signs of stopping. She had never seen a blizzard last this long, this fierce. They were trapped together, at least for now. "Tell me about yourself," Vincent said when they had finished eating. "How does a woman end up alone in a cabin in Montana Territory? It is a long story. We have time," she sighed, pouring them both more coffee. "My parents had a homestead about 30 miles south of here. They worked it for 15 years, barely scraping by. 3 years ago, my father was killed by a falling tree. My mother died 6 months later. I think she died of grief more than anything else. I sold the homestead, could not bear to stay there anymore, and bought this piece of land. It is smaller, easier for one person to manage. I have the chickens, a milk cow, a good well. I grow a garden in summer, hunt when I can, I get by. No siblings, no husband. I had a brother. He went to California during the gold rush and never came back. No letters, nothing. I have to assume he is dead. As for a husband, there are not many men interested in a woman who wants to homestead alone." "Their loss," Vincent said quietly. She felt heat rise to her cheeks and turned away. "What about you? What takes you to Deadwood in the middle of winter? Work." "I am a cattle hand mostly, but I take other jobs when they are available. Heard there was a ranch outside Deadwood looking for men who could handle stock in rough country. I have worked ranches from Texas to Wyoming. I know cattle, I know horses, I know how to survive." "Clearly," she said dryly, gesturing to him wrapped in blankets by her fire. He had the grace to laugh, though it turned into a cough. Fair point. Though in my defense I have never seen a storm blow in that fast. 1 minute the sky was clear, the next I could not see my hand in front of my face. Montana weather is unpredictable. You have to always be prepared for the worst. I will remember that. The day passed slowly. The storm did not break. Vincent was still weak, still recovering, so she made him stay by the fire. She did her chores, feeding the chickens in her small barn that was connected to the cabin by a covered walkway, milking her cow, checking her supplies. They had enough food for a week if they were careful, more if they were frugal. The blizzard could not last longer than that. It could not. Evening came. She made stew from dried venison, potatoes, and carrots from her root cellar. Vincent insisted on sitting at her small table to eat, though she could see the effort it cost him. He was regaining his strength quickly, which spoke to a naturally strong constitution. His color was better, his movements surer. She found herself watching him when she thought he was not looking, noticing things she should not notice, like the way his hair fell across his forehead, or the scar on his left shoulder, or the way his hands moved with unconscious grace even when doing something as simple as breaking bread. "Why are you really alone?" Vincent asked suddenly. "A woman like you should have suitors lined up from here to Denver. A woman like me, beautiful, strong, capable, kind." She felt her face flame. "You should not say such things." "Why not? They are true." "You do not know me. I know you saved my life. I know you could have turned me away and no one would have blamed you. I know you have a good heart. That is more than I know about most people after years of acquaintance." She did not know how to respond to that. No man had ever spoken to her like this, direct and honest, without games or posturing. It unnerved her and thrilled her in equal measure. The storm finally broke on the third day. The wind died, the snow stopped, and when Lydia opened the door, the world outside was transformed. Snow drifted as high as the cabin windows in places, and the sky was a bright, painful blue, the air so cold it hurt to breathe. Vincent came to stand beside her, still moving carefully but much stronger now. "I need to find my horse," he said. "If she is still alive, I cannot leave her out there." "She will be dead by now," Lydia said gently. 3 days in that cold lane with no shelter. I am sorry, but there is no way she survived." His jaw tightened, but he nodded. "I know, but I have to try. I owe her that much. Then we will go together. You are not strong enough yet to go alone, and I know this land better than you do." They bundled up in every warm thing she had. Lydia had snowshoes, and she fashioned a makeshift pair for Vincent from willow branches and leather straps. It took them an hour to get ready, and by the time they stepped outside, the sun was high and bright, reflecting off the snow so intensely they had to squint. They found his horse 2 miles from the cabin, partially buried in a drift. She had been a good mare, sturdy and strong, and she had almost made it to a stand of trees that might have provided some shelter. Almost. Lydia looked away as Vincent knelt beside the frozen body, his hand on the mare's neck, his head bowed. She gave him privacy for his grief. "I am sorry," she said when he finally stood and came back to her. "She was a good horse. She deserved better. She got you close enough to find help. She saved your life as much as I did." He looked at her, something shifting in his expression. "You are right. I will remember her well." They walked back to the cabin in silence. The cold was brutal, seeping through layers of clothing, but the sky stayed clear, and for that Lydia was grateful. Another storm now would be deadly. When they finally made it back and shut the door behind them, they were both shaking with cold despite the exertion of walking through deep snow. "You cannot go to Deadwood now," Lydia said as they warmed themselves by the fire. "Not on foot, not in this weather." The next town is 15 miles south, and even that would take you the better part of a day in these conditions. I know. I was thinking the same thing. You could stay here. Until spring. I could use help around the place, and you need somewhere to recover, to wait out the worst of the winter. He looked at her steadily. Are you sure? You do not know me, Lydia. You said it yourself. I know enough. You are honest. You loved your horse enough to search for her even when you knew she was likely dead. You have not once made me feel unsafe, even though we are alone together and I have no one to protect me if you meant me harm. That tells me what kind of man you are. I could be fooling you. You could. But I do not think you are. Vincent was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I owe you my life, Lydia Prescott. If you will have me, I will stay. I will work, earn my keep. I will not be a burden. Just stay, she said simply. We will figure out the rest. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Vincent proved true to his word, working hard despite still recovering his full strength. He repaired the chicken coop where the roof had been sagging, chopped enough firewood to last them through to spring, fixed the door that had never hung quite right. Lydia found herself enjoying his company more than she wanted to admit. He was easy to talk to, quick to laugh, thoughtful in ways that surprised her. He noticed things, like how she always saved the crispy edge of the cornbread for last because it was her favorite, or how she sang to herself when she thought no one was listening. They talked for hours by the fire in the evenings. He told her about growing up in Missouri, about the war that had torn his family apart, about the years he had spent drifting west trying to outrun his memories. She told him about her childhood, about learning to hunt from her father, about the loneliness of the past 3 years, about the dreams she still had for her little homestead. I want to expand, she said one night. I want cattle, maybe a dozen head to start. I could sell beef in town, make enough to really build something here, but I cannot manage cattle alone. You could with help, Vincent said. Good fences, a proper barn, and someone who knows what they are doing. It is possible. It is just a dream. Dreams are important. They are what keep us going when everything else says to quit. She looked at him across the fire, saw the way the flames cast shadows on his face, and felt something shift inside her. This was dangerous. She was falling for him, for a drifter who would be gone as soon as the snow melted. She needed to protect her heart, but she did not know how when he looked at her like that, like she was something precious. Christmas came. They had no decorations, no gifts, but Lydia made a special meal of roasted chicken and potatoes with dried apple pie for dessert. Vincent surprised her by producing a harmonica from his saddlebag and playing carols. His playing was rough but heartfelt, and she sang along, their voices blending in the small, warm cabin while outside the world was frozen and still. This is the best Christmas I have had in years, Vincent said when they finally fell silent. Thank you, Lydia. You do not have to thank me. I am glad you are here. The words were out before she could stop them, more honest than she intended. Are you, he asked softly, truly? Yes. He reached across the small space between them and took her hand. His palm was warm, calloused from work, and the touch sent electricity racing up her arm. I am glad I am here too. I know I should not say this. I know I have no right, but I have to tell you, I am falling in love with you, Lydia. I think I started falling the moment I opened my eyes and saw you watching over me. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. Vincent, I cannot. You are leaving when spring comes. You have a job waiting in Deadwood, a life to get back to. What if I do not want that life anymore? What if I want this? What if I want you? You do not know what you want. You are grateful because I saved your life, but gratitude is not love. You think I do not know the difference. He moved closer, still holding her hand. I have felt gratitude before, Lydia. This is not it. This is waking up every morning and being glad you are the first thing I see. This is watching you work and being amazed by your strength. This is lying awake at night thinking about what it would be like to kiss you, to hold you, to spend my life making you happy." She was shaking now, torn between what she wanted and what she knew was sensible. What if it does not last? What if the winter ends and you realize this was just cabin fever, just proximity? Then I am a fool, but I do not think I am. Give me a chance, Lydia. Let me prove this is real. She looked into his eyes, those storm sky eyes, and saw nothing but sincerity. She thought about the past weeks, about how easy it had been having him here, about how the cabin felt fuller, warmer, more like a home than it had in years. She thought about what it would be like when he left, how empty everything would feel. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "And it terrifies me." He smiled, slow and warm. "Good. I would be worried if you were not at least a little scared. This matters, Lydia. You matter." He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She did not. When his lips met hers, it was gentle, questioning, perfect. She had never been kissed before, had never let anyone close enough, but this felt right. This felt like coming home. They pulled apart slowly, both breathing hard. Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I am going to marry you, Lydia Prescott. I am going to stay here and help you build your dream. I am going to spend every day of the rest of my life making sure you never regret saving me from that blizzard." "Is that a proposal?" "Not yet. When I propose, you will know it. I am just giving you fair warning of my intentions." She laughed, the sound surprising her. When was the last time she had laughed like this, free and genuine? Fair warning noted. January turned to February. The deep snows began to recede, though it was still bitterly cold. Vincent worked on plans for expanding the homestead, sketching out where a barn could go, where fences would run, how many cattle they could reasonably support. Lydia found herself thinking in terms of we and us instead of I and me, and it did not frighten her as much as it should have. They were careful with each other, mindful of propriety even though they were alone. Vincent slept by the fire, Lydia in her bed. But they held hands, they kissed goodnight, they talked about the future like it was something they would share. Lydia felt herself opening up in ways she never had before, trusting him with parts of herself she had kept locked away. One night in late February, a warm Chinook wind blew through, melting snow and bringing the promise of spring. They stood outside together, breathing in air that did not hurt, watching stars emerge in a clear sky. "I need to go to town," Lydia said. "We are low on some supplies and I need to check on things, let people know I survived the winter." "I will go with you." "Vincent, people will talk." "A woman alone all winter with a man, it will cause gossip." "Let them talk. I am going to marry you anyway. Might as well give them something real to gossip about." She elbowed him gently. "You have not actually proposed yet, remember? Soon," he promised. "I want to do it right." They rode into town 3 days later on Lydia's horse, a sturdy gelding named Buck who had weathered the winter well in the small barn. The town was called Silver Creek, barely more than a main street with a general store, saloon, blacksmith, and a handful of houses. People stared as they rode in together, and Lydia could see the speculation in their eyes. She held her head high, refusing to be ashamed of anything she had done. Inside the general store, Mrs. Henderson, the proprietor's wife, could barely contain her curiosity. "Lydia Prescott, we were so worried about you. When that blizzard hit and you did not come to town, we feared the worst. And who is this gentleman?" "This is Vincent Quinn. His horse went lame in the storm and he took shelter at my cabin. He has been kind enough to help me with repairs over the winter." Mrs. Henderson's eyes were as wide as saucers. "Oh my, well, that is quite fortunate for both of you." They gathered their supplies, ignoring the whispers that followed them. At the counter, Vincent insisted on paying for half, pulling out money from a belt that Lydia had not known he wore. She started to protest, but he silenced her with a look. "Partners," he said firmly. "Equal." Outside, they loaded the supplies onto Buck and were preparing to leave when a man stepped out of the saloon. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a marshal's badge pinned to his vest. He looked at Vincent with sharp, assessing eyes. "Name is Marshal Grant," he said. "I hear you spent the winter up at the Prescott place." "That is right," Vincent said evenly. "My horse died in the blizzard. Miss Prescott was kind enough to offer me shelter." "Where you from, Quinn?" "Missouri originally. Been working cattle in Wyoming the past few years." "Any warrants I should know about?" "No, sir. I am not an outlaw." The marshal studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "See that you treat Miss Prescott with respect. She is good people. We look after our own here." "I understand, Marshal. You have my word as a gentleman." They rode out of town in silence. When they were far enough away, Lydia said, "I am sorry about that. Marshal Grant means well, but he can be overzealous. He was protecting you. I respect that. Shows you have people who care about you. Did you mean it?" "What you told him about being a gentleman." Vincent looked at her seriously. "I have never lied to you, Lydia, and I am not going to start now. Yes, I meant it. Every word." March arrived with muddy roads and the first green shoots pushing through the melting snow. Lydia felt a sense of urgency building. Spring meant Vincent's original plans could resume. He could go to Deadwood, find that job, live the life he had been planning before the blizzard. She did not want to hold him back, but she also did not want to lose him. She was completely in love with him now, no longer fighting it, no longer afraid to admit it to herself. The question was what he would choose. She woke one morning to find him already up, which was unusual. He was always an early riser, but not this early. She dressed quickly and went outside, finding him down by the creek that ran through her property, standing in a patch of sun with something in his hands. "Vincent," he turned, and she saw he was nervous, his jaw tight, his eyes bright. "I have been waiting for the right moment. Seems like it is never going to be perfect, so I figured this was as good as any." Her heart started racing. "What are you talking about?" He came to her, dropped to one knee right there in the mud and melting snow, and pulled out a ring. It was simple, a thin gold band with a small chip of turquoise set in it. "I had this made in town last week. Had to sneak away while you were talking to Mrs. Henderson. Turquoise because it is the color of the sky the day you saved me. Gold because you are worth more than gold to me, but I cannot afford anything fancier yet." "Vincent," she breathed. "Lydia Prescott, I came to Montana looking for work. I found a purpose instead. I found a home, I found you. I know I am not much. I am a drifter, a cowboy with more debts than assets. But I love you with everything I am. I want to build a life with you. I want to help you raise cattle and expand this homestead and grow old watching the sunset from that porch we are going to build. Will you marry me?" Tears were streaming down her face. "Yes, yes, of course yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Then he stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around while she laughed and cried at the same time. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, deeply, a kiss full of promise and passion and everything they would build together. "I love you," she said against his lips. "I love you so much. I know, I love you too." They were married in Silver Creek a month later. It was a small ceremony, attended by the townspeople who had watched Lydia grow up and who had come to accept Vincent as one of their own. Mrs. Henderson cried through the whole thing. Marshal Grant gave Lydia away, and his wife stood as witness. Lydia wore a simple dress of blue calico that she had sewn herself, and Vincent wore new trousers and a white shirt that made his eyes look even more blue-gray than usual. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Vincent kissed her like she was the most precious thing in the world, and she knew she had made the right choice. This was real. This was forever. They honeymooned in the cabin, the same place where their story had begun. It felt right, full circle. Vincent carried her over the threshold even though she protested that it was already her home, and he said that was exactly why he wanted to do it properly. That first night as man and wife was tender and sweet, and everything Lydia had never let herself dream about. Vincent was patient, gentle, making sure she felt safe and loved. Afterward, lying in his arms, she felt complete in a way she never had before. "No regrets?" he asked, running his fingers through her hair. "Not a single one. Only that I did not meet you sooner." Spring turned to summer. True to his word, Vincent threw himself into building their dream. They rode to the nearest town with cattle for sale and purchased 10 head, mostly heifers with one young bull. It took most of their combined savings, but Vincent was confident they could make it work. He built a proper barn, working from dawn until dusk, his shirt off in the heat, skin bronzing under the Montana sun. Lydia tried not to watch him too obviously, but she was not always successful. He caught her looking once and grinned, cocky and pleased. "See something you like, Mrs. Quinn?" "Maybe. Get back to work, Mr. Quinn." He laughed and did just that. The barn went up strong and sturdy, big enough for the cattle and buck and the 2 additional horses they planned to buy. They built fences together, digging post holes in soil that fought them every step of the way, stringing wire until their hands were blistered and raw. It was hard work, back-breaking, but they did it together, and that made all the difference. By August, the homestead was transformed. The cattle were thriving on the good grass, the garden was producing more vegetables than they could eat, and they had started selling eggs and milk in town for extra income. Lydia had never been happier. She woke each morning to Vincent's kiss, worked alongside him all day, and fell asleep in his arms each night. This was the life she had dreamed of, but never thought she would have. One evening in September, as they sat on the new porch Vincent had built, watching the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold, Lydia felt a wave of nausea hit her. She had been feeling off for a few days, tired and queasy, but had attributed it to hard work and the summer heat. Now, sitting still, the feeling was undeniable. She knew what it meant. She had seen enough pregnant animals to recognize the signs in herself. "Vincent, I need to tell you something." He looked over at her, immediately concerned. "What is wrong? Are you feeling ill?" "Not exactly." "Well, yes, but not in a bad way. I think I am with child." He went completely still. "You think?" "I am almost certain. All the signs are there. We are going to have a baby, Vincent." For a moment she worried he would be upset. They had not planned this, had not discussed children beyond vague mentions of someday. But then his face split into the biggest smile she had ever seen. He jumped up, pulled her to her feet, and hugged her so tight she could barely breathe. "A baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby." "You are happy?" "Happy. Lydia, I am over the moon. This is incredible. This is perfect. When do you think?" "Early spring, I would guess. April, maybe March." "Spring," he said, still smiling. "New life in spring. That is perfect." He kissed her then, tender and reverent, his hands gentle on her waist. I love you so much. Thank you." "For what?" "For saving me. For giving me a home, for this, for everything." She laughed, tears in her eyes. "I should be thanking you. You saved me too, you know. I did not realize how lonely I was until you were here." The months that followed were both wonderful and difficult. Lydia's body changed, growing round with their child, and Vincent was attentive to the point of being overbearing. He would not let her lift anything heavy, insisted she rest more, worried constantly. It was sweet but also frustrating because she was used to working hard and did not want to be treated like an invalid. "I am pregnant, not dying," she told him one day when he tried to stop her from mucking out the barn. "I know. But what if you hurt yourself? What if something happens to the baby? Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I am strong. We will be fine." But she appreciated his concern, even when it drove her crazy. It came from love, and she could never fault him for that. Winter came again, their second together, but this time they were prepared. The barn was stocked with hay, the root cellar was full, they had wood for the fire and meat hanging in the smokehouse. When the first snow fell, Lydia stood at the window, her hand on her swollen belly, and thought about how much had changed in a year. Last winter, she had been alone. This winter, she had a husband who loved her and a baby on the way. "What are you thinking?" Vincent asked, coming to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her as much as her belly would allow. "That I am grateful for that blizzard. Is that strange?" "Not at all. I am grateful too. It brought me to you." Christmas was special this year. Vincent carved a cradle from pine, working on it in secret in the barn, presenting it to her on Christmas morning. It was beautiful, smooth and sturdy, and Lydia cried when she saw it. They ate roasted goose that Vincent had shot and talked about names for the baby, going back and forth without deciding on anything. "If it is a boy, we could name him after your father," Vincent suggested. "Thomas. That is a good name. And if it is a girl, what about Grace?" "I have always liked that name. Grace Quinn, I like that." January and February were hard. Lydia was huge now, uncomfortable, ready to be done with pregnancy. Vincent did everything he could to help, taking over all the heavy work, cooking meals, rubbing her feet when they swelled. He was patient and kind, and she loved him more than ever for it. The baby came on a cold night in late March, 2 weeks earlier than Lydia had expected. Her water broke just after midnight and Vincent nearly panicked. They had planned for him to ride for the midwife in town, but the labor came on too fast and too hard. There was no time. "What do I do?" Vincent asked, his face pale. "Lydia, what do I do?" "You help me," she said through gritted teeth. "You have delivered calves and foals. This is not so different. This is completely different. This is our baby. This is you. Vincent, I need you. Please, stay calm." He took a deep breath, visibly pulling himself together. Then he helped her to the bed, got water boiling, gathered clean cloths and blankets. Between contractions, Lydia told him what to expect, what to look for, what to do. He listened intently, his jaw set with determination. When the next big contraction hit, he held her hand and let her squeeze as hard as she needed. The labor lasted 6 hours. It was the longest 6 hours of Vincent's life, watching Lydia in pain and being helpless to stop it. But she was strong, so strong. And when dawn broke and their baby finally came into the world with a lusty cry, Vincent was there to catch him, tears streaming down his face. "It is a boy," he said, his voice choked. "Lydia, we have a son." She reached for the baby and Vincent placed him carefully in her arms. He was red and wrinkled and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and his father's blue-gray eyes. Lydia felt a surge of love so powerful it took her breath away. "Thomas," she whispered. "Thomas Vincent Quinn." Vincent leaned down and kissed her forehead, then kissed his son's downy head. "He is beautiful. You are amazing. I cannot believe you just did that." "We did it together," she said. "All of this we did together." The weeks that followed were exhausting and wonderful. Thomas was a healthy baby, hungry and loud, and Lydia was consumed with caring for him. Vincent took over all the outside work without complaint, and at night, when Thomas would not settle, he would walk him around the cabin, singing softly until the baby fell asleep. Watching her husband with their son made Lydia fall in love with him all over again. Spring came in full, the world greening and warming. Their cattle had multiplied, one of the heifers giving birth to a healthy calf. Business was good. They had money saved for the first time in their lives, enough that Vincent talked about buying more land, expanding further. But Lydia was content with what they had. She did not need more. She had everything that mattered. Summer brought its own rhythms. Thomas grew, becoming more alert, more responsive. He smiled at his father and kicked his legs when his mother sang to him. They took him outside in the warm evenings, letting him feel the sun on his face, the breeze in his hair. Vincent fashioned a sling so Lydia could carry him while she did light work, and she loved having her baby close while she tended the garden or fed the chickens. In August, they celebrated their second wedding anniversary quietly, just the three of them. Mrs. Henderson had agreed to watch Thomas for a few hours, and Vincent took Lydia on a picnic by the creek. They sat on a blanket under the cottonwood trees and ate cold chicken and fresh bread and strawberries from their garden. 2 years, Lydia said, lying back with her head on Vincent's lap. It feels like both forever and no time at all. I know what you mean. I cannot remember what life was like before you. Cold, lonely, aimless. Yes to all of that. He traced the line of her jaw with his finger. You are my compass, Lydia. You point me true. That is quite poetic for a cowboy. I have my moments. She pulled him down to kiss her, and for a little while they were not parents or homesteaders or business partners. They were just a man and a woman in love, and it was perfect. The years passed, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved the animals and followed his father everywhere. When he was 3, Lydia became pregnant again. This time, she was less nervous, more confident. The labor was easier, faster, and they welcomed a daughter in the spring of 1878. They named her Clara, and she was the image of her mother, with blonde hair and green eyes and a smile that could light up the darkest room. Their homestead continued to thrive. They now had 30 head of cattle, 4 horses, a flock of sheep that Lydia had insisted on, and more chickens than they could count. They had hired a hand to help with the heavy work, a young man named Sam who lived in the bunkhouse Vincent had built next to the barn. The garden had expanded, and Lydia sold preserves and pickles in town along with eggs and milk and butter. Money was not abundant, but it was steady, and they were comfortable. In 1880, tragedy struck Silver Creek. A fire started in the saloon and spread quickly, destroying half the town's main street. No one was killed, but many were left homeless, including the Henderson family who ran the general store. Without hesitation, Vincent and Lydia opened their home, housing the Hendersons and 2 other families for 3 months while the town rebuilt. It was crowded and chaotic, but it felt like the right thing to do. These people had been their friends and neighbors, had welcomed Vincent when he was a stranger. This was how community worked. When the Hendersons finally moved back to town, Mrs. Henderson hugged Lydia so tight she could barely breathe. "You have the biggest heart of anyone I know," she said. "This town is lucky to have you and Vincent." "We are lucky to have this town," Lydia replied. "You all took a chance on a stranger. You accepted us. That matters." Life continued its steady pace. Thomas was now 7, already riding and helping with the cattle. Clara was 4, more interested in the garden and the chickens than the livestock, always picking flowers and making crowns from dandelions. Vincent had more gray in his hair now, and Lydia had fine lines around her eyes from squinting in the sun, but they were happy. Deeply, contentedly happy. One evening in the fall of 1882, sitting on their porch watching the children play in the yard, Vincent said, "Do you ever think about that blizzard?" "All the time," Lydia said. "How could I not? It changed everything." I almost did not make it to your cabin. I was ready to lie down in the snow, let it take me. I had nothing to live for at that point, but something kept pushing me forward, some instinct that told me to keep going. And then I saw your light. She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. I am glad you kept going. I am glad you found me. I owe you my life, Lydia. I have said it before, but it is still true. Everything good in my life came from you. We owe each other, she said. You gave me a family, a partner, a life bigger and better than I dreamed. You said you would stay, and you did. You kept your promise. I always will. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set in shades of purple and gold. Thomas was teaching Clara how to skip stones at the creek, his voice patient as he showed her the right flick of the wrist. Vincent squeezed Lydia's hand, and she squeezed back, a silent conversation they had perfected over the years. Should we have another? Vincent asked suddenly. Another child? Lydia looked at him in surprise. Really, at our ages? Why not? We are only in our early 30s. We have the space, the means, and I would not mind another little one running around. She considered it, thinking about the chaos and joy babies brought, about midnight feedings and first steps and tiny hands clutching her fingers. Maybe, she said. Let us see what happens. What happened was another son, born in the summer of 1883. They named him James, and he was an easy baby, content to sleep and eat and watch the world with solemn dark eyes. Thomas was old enough now to be a real help, fetching diapers and rocking his baby brother when he fussed. Clara was less interested in the baby, more concerned with her dolls and her garden, but she would sing to James sometimes, sweet nonsense songs that made him smile. The homestead expanded again. Vincent bought the adjoining property when the owner decided to move back east, giving them more grazing land, more room to grow. They hired another hand, then a third. What had started as a small cabin and a dream had become a thriving ranch. They were not rich by any means, but they were successful, respected in the community, and most importantly, they were happy. In 1885, the railway came through, passing just 15 miles from their ranch. It brought new opportunities for selling cattle and goods, new people moving to the territory, and new challenges. But Vincent and Lydia had weathered worse than progress. They adapted, found ways to make the railway work for them instead of against them. Marshal Grant retired, and the town held a celebration in his honor. At the party, he pulled Vincent aside and said, I want to apologize. For what? Vincent asked, genuinely confused. For how I treated you when you first came to town. I was suspicious, protective of Lydia, and I gave you a hard time, but you proved me wrong. You are a good man, Vincent Quinn. You built a good life here. I am proud to call you friend. Vincent shook his hand firmly. No apology needed, Marshal. You were doing your job, looking after one of your own. I respect that. Always have. The years continued to pass, each one a thread in the tapestry of their life together. Thomas grew into a strong young man, taking over more of the ranch work. Clara became a skilled horsewoman and an even better cook, her preserves winning prizes at the county fair. James was still young, only 7, but already showing signs of his father's way with animals. In 1890, Vincent turned 42. They celebrated with a party at the ranch, inviting everyone they knew. The yard was full of people, tables groaning with food, children running wild. Vincent stood on the porch, looking out at the gathering, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This was his life. These were his people. This was home. Lydia came to stand beside him, her hair now streaked with gray but her eyes as green and bright as ever. What are you thinking about? That I am the luckiest man alive. I think you might be right. He pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. I love you, Lydia Quinn. I have loved you from the moment I opened my eyes and saw you watching over me. I will love you until the day I die and probably beyond. That is quite a declaration for a party. I mean every word. I know. I love you too, always." The party went on into the night, lanterns strung up to light the yard as people danced and laughed. Vincent danced with Lydia, with Clara, even with Mrs. Henderson, who was now in her 70s, but still spry. Thomas danced with a girl from town, a pretty redhead named Sarah, and Vincent made a mental note to ask him about that later. Life was good. As the years continued to roll by, Vincent and Lydia watched their children grow into adults. Thomas married Sarah in 1894, and they built a house on the far edge of the ranch property. A year later, they gave Vincent and Lydia their first grandchild, a baby girl they named Lydia after her grandmother. Lydia cried when she held her namesake for the first time, overcome with joy and the strange circularity of life. Clara married in 1897 to a banker from Silver Creek, a steady, serious man named Robert who clearly adored her. They moved into town but visited the ranch often, and Clara still helped with the preserves and the chickens. James, now 14, showed no interest in romance yet, more concerned with horses and cattle and learning everything his father could teach him. In 1900, Vincent and Lydia celebrated their 21st wedding anniversary. They were both in their early 50s now, grayer and more lined, but still strong, still healthy, still deeply in love. They had weathered droughts and harsh winters, cattle disease and market crashes, the everyday struggles of frontier life. But they had weathered it together, and that had made all the difference. One evening that summer, they sat on the porch as they had done countless times before. The sun was setting, the sky on fire with color. Their grandchildren played in the yard, Thomas and Sarah's 3 kids now, ranging from 6 years to 6 months. James was teaching the oldest how to rope a fence post, his patience endless. "We did good," Vincent said, his arm around Lydia's shoulders. "We did," she agreed. "We built something real, something lasting. All because you opened that door. All because you kept walking." He turned to look at her, his blue-gray eyes still as striking as they had been 27 years ago when she had first seen them. "Thank you, Lydia, for everything, for saving me that night, for loving me, for building this life with me, for every single day we have had together." "Thank you for staying," she said simply. "Thank you for choosing this life, for choosing me every single day. I would make the same choice every time. In every life, in every version of this story, I would choose you." They sat together as the sun sank below the horizon, and the stars began to emerge, one by one, in the darkening sky. Around them, their family laughed and played, the sounds of home and love and life well lived. The wind picked up slightly, carrying the scent of grass and cattle and the coming night. Inside the cabin that Vincent had helped repair all those years ago, the cradle he had carved for Thomas still sat, now used for grandchildren. On the mantel were photographs, a relatively new luxury, capturing moments of their life together. Wedding days, babies, birthdays, ordinary days that had turned out to be extraordinary simply because they were lived together. Lydia leaned her head on Vincent's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his body, the solid reality of him beside her. She thought about the lonely woman she had been, standing at that door in the middle of a blizzard, making the choice to open it. She had not known then what that choice would bring. She could never have imagined this life, this love, this abundance of joy. "I would do it all again, too," she said softly. "Every hard day, every struggle, every fear, it was all worth it." "Yes," Vincent agreed, "it was." The years that followed were gentler, slower. Vincent and Lydia gradually handed over more of the ranch operations to Thomas and James, who worked the land together with easy partnership. Vincent still rode out most mornings, checking fences and cattle, unwilling to fully retire. But he came back earlier now, spent more time on the porch with Lydia, more time with their growing collection of grandchildren. Clara had 3 children of her own by 1905, and James finally married in 1906, bringing home a strong, capable woman named Margaret who fit into the family as if she had always been there. More grandchildren followed, until Vincent and Lydia had lost count of how many small people called them Grandma and Grandpa. In 1910, Silver Creek held a celebration for its 50th anniversary. The town had grown, now boasting a school, a church, a proper hotel, and a railway station. At the celebration, the mayor gave a speech honoring the founding families and those who had built the community. Vincent and Lydia were recognized for their contributions, for taking in families after the fire, for their steady presence and generosity over the decades. "We are just ranchers," Vincent said when pressed to speak. "We worked hard, same as everyone else." "You are more than that," the mayor insisted. "You are an example of what this town stands for: hard work, integrity, and taking care of each other." After the ceremony, an old woman approached them. It took Lydia a moment to recognize Mrs. Henderson, now ancient and frail but with the same bright eyes. "Do you remember when you first came to my store?" she asked Vincent. "I was so scandalized, a strange man spending the winter with our Lydia." "I remember," Vincent said, smiling. "You looked at me like I might be a bank robber. I was protecting her, but you proved me wrong. You proved everyone wrong who doubted. You built a beautiful life together. That is what true love looks like." They stayed at the celebration until late, dancing and visiting with old friends and neighbors. Some of the people Lydia had known her whole life were gone now, victims of age or illness or accidents. But new people had come, children had grown into adults, and the cycle continued. That was life, she supposed, constantly changing, constantly moving forward, but the love remained constant. In 1912, Vincent was 64 and Lydia was 61. They were slowing down, no denying it, but they were still active, still engaged with the ranch and the family. One morning in early winter, Vincent woke with a pain in his chest. He tried to hide it from Lydia, but she knew him too well. "You are going to see the doctor," she said firmly. "It is nothing, just indigestion." "Vincent Quinn, you are going to see the doctor if I have to hog-tie you and drag you there myself." He went, grumbling the whole way. The doctor examined him thoroughly, asked many questions, and finally sat back with a serious expression. "Your heart is not as strong as it used to be. You need to take it easy, no more heavy work, no stress. I run a ranch. Stress is part of the job. Then you need to let your sons run the ranch. You have done your part, Vincent. Let the next generation take over." Vincent hated the idea of being idle, but one look at Lydia's worried face, and he knew he had no choice. He agreed to step back, to rest more, to take care of himself. It was harder than he expected, watching others do work he had always done, but Thomas and James were capable, and the ranch continued to thrive without his constant involvement. The next few years were peaceful. Vincent adjusted to his new pace of life, spending his days tending the garden with Lydia, playing with grandchildren, sitting on the porch and watching the world go by. He and Lydia talked for hours about everything and nothing, reliving memories, making plans for the future even though they both knew their time was growing shorter. "Do you have any regrets?" Lydia asked him one evening in the spring of 1915. "Not a single one." "You?" "No. I would not change anything. Not even the hard times, the droughts, the struggles, especially not those. They taught us what we were made of. They proved we could survive anything together. He took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture so familiar it was like breathing. I love you, Lydia. I need you to know that. Whatever happens, wherever I go, I will love you. I know, and I love you, always. Vincent lived to see 1918, making it to his 70th birthday. By then, he was frail, his heart too weak to sustain him much longer. He died on a quiet morning in July in his sleep, with Lydia beside him. She woke to find him gone, his face peaceful, his hand still holding hers. The funeral was attended by what seemed like half of Montana. The church in Silver Creek could not hold everyone, so they held the service outside under the big sky that Vincent had loved. Thomas spoke, his voice breaking. Clara read a psalm. James stood silent, tears streaming down his face. And Lydia, dry-eyed and dignified, thanked everyone for coming and celebrating the life of a good man. After everyone left, after the food had been cleared away and the sympathies offered, Lydia went back to the ranch. She stood on the porch, looking out at the land they had built together, and finally let herself cry. She cried for the loss, for the empty space beside her, for all the days they would not have together. But she also cried in gratitude, for the years they had shared, for the love they had built, for the life that had started with a blizzard and a choice to open a door. The months that followed were hard. Lydia had to learn how to live alone again, something she had not done in 45 years. The cabin felt too empty, too quiet. But her family rallied around her, visiting often, making sure she was never truly alone. The grandchildren came by daily, bringing noise and life and reminders that the family Vincent had helped build was still thriving. Lydia lived another 7 years, dying peacefully in her sleep in 1925 at the age of 74. She was buried beside Vincent under the cottonwood trees by the creek, the spot where they had picnicked on their 2nd anniversary. The double headstone reads simply, Vincent Quinn, beloved husband, father, grandfather. Lydia Quinn, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. Together forever. The ranch stayed in the family, passing from Thomas to his children, then to their children. The original cabin was preserved, kept as a reminder of where it all started. Over the decades, it became a family tradition to tell the story of the blizzard, of Vincent stumbling through the snow, of Lydia opening the door, of how a single act of kindness and courage had created a legacy that spanned generations. In the years that followed, the great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren would visit the cabin, would stand on that porch, and would hear the story. They heard about the night Lydia saved Vincent's life, about how he had said he owed her everything, about how she had simply said, "Just stay." They heard about the love that had built a ranch, a family, a life that mattered. And on cold winter nights when the wind howled and the snow fell, it was easy to imagine a figure stumbling through the storm toward a light in the distance, toward warmth and safety and love. It was easy to imagine a woman opening a door despite the danger, despite the risk, because it was the right thing to do. It was easy to believe that love, real love, the kind that lasted, started with the simple choice to help a stranger, to see the humanity in someone else, to open your heart as well as your door. The story became legend in Silver Creek and the surrounding territory. People spoke of the Quinns with respect, pointing to them as an example of what could be built with hard work, dedication, and love. The ranch itself became a landmark, a place people pointed to and said, "That is where Vincent Quinn settled after Lydia Prescott saved his life in the blizzard of '73. But beyond the legend, beyond the story that was told and retold, there was a simpler truth. Two people had found each other against impossible odds. They had chosen to build something together. They had worked and struggled and sacrificed and loved, and in doing so, they had created something that lasted far beyond their own lives. The cabin still stood nearly a century after it had sheltered a dying man from a storm. The land still produced, still supported the family that worked it. And in the small cemetery by the creek, under the cottonwood trees that had grown tall and strong, two headstones stood side by side, marking the resting place of a cowboy and the woman who saved him, who loved him, who had simply asked him to stay, and he had stayed. Through every season, every storm, every joy and sorrow, he had stayed, just as he promised, just as she had known he would, because that was what love meant. It meant staying. It meant choosing every single day to be there, to show up, to keep building even when it was hard. It meant that a moment of compassion in a blizzard could become a lifetime of devotion, and a legacy that would never be forgotten.